तप्तजीवनं कविव्रीडितं कल्मषापहं श्रवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गणन्ति पुरिराज. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to squirt souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome, everyone, to our class on the Gospel of Ramakrishna. We're on the chapter Instruction to Vaishnavas and Brahmos, and the date is Wednesday, October 10th, 1883, and we're on page 304. The instruction to Vaishnavas and Brahmos, the main Vaishnava present, it seems, is Balaram, Bosa's father. And we'll get introduced to him here. Balaram's father was a wealthy man with estates in different parts of Orissa, an orthodox member of the Vaishnava sect. He had built temples and arranged for distribution of food to the pilgrims at various holy places. He had been spending the last years of his life in Vrindavan. The Vaishnavas, for the most part, are bigoted in their religious views. Okay, now we have to understand a few things here. The term Vaishnava is a very broad term, and it can refer to anyone who follows any of the either Vishnu as Narayana or any of the incarnations, Rama and the Krishna. They're all considered Vaishnavas, but in the context here, this will mean almost all the ways, and specifically the worshippers of Krishna who are followers of Chaitanya Deva. And the Chaitanya movement, the Leela of Chaitanya Deva took place mostly outside of Bengal, because he spent most of his years in Puri, on pilgrimage in South India, and then pilgrimage in the north, and the Vrindavan. So it's very strong in the Vrindavan area and also in Orissa. And Balaram Bosa's father, he also had a house in Vrindavan. And I don't know if the order owns it or not, but I remember being taken there. I went to Vrindavan long back, over almost 50 years ago. No, I'm sorry, almost 40 years ago. And the house is there. Holy Mother stayed there, and the cot that she slept on is still there. So it's considered a very holy place. So this is a little bit strong. I would say they're very orthodox in their views and a little bit exclusive. I don't know, very bigoted sounds too strong. But they did feel that the worship of Krishna was the highest type of worship, but others did also. It wasn't just them. There were many followers of the Shakta tradition that were equally one-sided and everything, but they got this reputation for being a little bit exclusive, standoffish. They had their own kind of separate society and rules and things like that a little bit. But there were also many great scholars and great pundits and everything, so a little bit strong. Some of them harbor malicious feelings towards the followers of the Tantra and Vedanta. But Sri Ramakrishna never encouraged such a narrow outlook. This introduction that M is giving is a little bit to explain why Sri Ramakrishna is going to emphasize this liberal attitude. So this is why he's telling us all of this. But Sri Ramakrishna never encouraged such a narrow outlook according to his teachings. Through earnestness and yearning, all lovers of God will ultimately reach the same goal. The master began the conversation in order to broaden the religious views of Balaram's father. Now we have to understand a few other things. that Balaram himself was a bit of an outcast in the family, partly because he went to Sri Ramakrishna, who wasn't considered part of this orthodox Vaishnava faith. And he was a little bit cut off from the family. So we'll find that his brother also came to see Sri Ramakrishna, and Thakur tried to explain to them this kind of more liberal point of view and everything. But we'll find that neither the brother nor the father are so bigoted or biased or anything, at least the way the conversation goes. So part of this is to, of course, to broaden the religious views of Balaram's father, but also so that they would stop objecting so much to Balaram and his family, because they were the closest family, the householder family to Sri Ramakrishna. He went to their home more often than any other home. We know that. They say 100 times he went there. Master to M. Once I thought, why should I be one-sided? See, he's talking to M in order to teach the others. There's a tradition like that, huh? That the mother-in-law scolds the daughter in order to teach the daughter-in-law. Is there some story like that? Okay. So, Sri Ramakrishna to him. Once I thought, why should I be one-sided? Therefore, I was initiated into Vaishnavism in Vrindavan. So this is what he's saying, that he himself wanted to practice all of the different faiths. Thakur came from a Vaishnava family, but not this type of Vaishnava family. There's a distinction that we have to make, that his family, they were worshippers of Rama, and worshippers of Rama and worshippers of Krishna are a little bit different, because the tradition of worship of Rama has to include the worship of Shiva and then worship of Durga, because of the Ramayana story and Rameshwaram and Sita making the image of the Shiva Lingam and everything. Whereas the Krishna tradition, they really stick to this worship, and the Bhagavad is their main text and everything. Therefore, I was initiated into Vaishnavism in Vrindavan and took the garb of a Vaishnava monk. Because if we look at most of the Vaishnava sadhana of Sri Ramakrishna, that more of it had to do with Rama than with Krishna. Even at Vatsalya Bhava, it's almost always worshiping Krishna as the child. In this case, it was Ramalala. It was the baby Rama. And the Dasya Bhava, that's also traditionally with Rama, that with the Hanuman and everything. So this was a little bit different. And this isn't during his years, during his regular sadhana. This is when he was on pilgrimage with Mathur Bhava. Again, at Dakshineshwar, I was initiated into the mystery of Rama worship. So this is when the Jatadhari came, and he had this small image of Ramlal, the baby Rama. And this was a very unusual thing, very hard for us to understand, at least me, to understand, how this image was alive for Sri Ramakrishna, and he could feed it and bathe it and everything, seeing the baby Rama there, and talk to it as a living, how that seeing this image translates into seeing the real baby Rama. Like Gopalarma, yeah. But Gopalarma, she felt the baby Krishna like on her shoulders and clinging around her neck. Did she actually have the image with her at that time? So that's slightly different. But Gopalarma also, yeah, it was a very living thing. But this is through this image. So that's why it's not just a vision, but seeing this, and not a small thing, with made of brass, probably, is the image of the baby Rama. So again, at Dakshineshwar, I was initiated into the mystery of Rama worship. I painted my forehead with a long mark and put on a string with a diamond around my neck. But after a few days, I gave them up. Now, we notice one thing, that whenever Thakur practiced any spiritual path, he used to say, I practiced the way they practice, I dressed the way they dress, I ate the way they ate. He did everything, in a sense, literally, And when he did his Islamic sadhana, we know that he wanted to eat food cooked by a Muslim cook. And this was too much for the authorities at the temple, the Kali temple. Too much concerned with the caste question and everything. So they got a Muslim cook to instruct a Brahmin cook how to cook according to Muslim style. I don't know what it was, maybe more onions or something, onions and garlic. But so he did that, and at various times when he would go through different types of sadhanas, he would remove the pictures from his room. Even that he wanted to immerse himself in the worldview of the people whose path he was trying to follow. So he did everything literally. So there's a big, they have some type of dress with a long, like a long kurta or something that they wear. So he used to wear that when he was doing this Vaishnava practice. A certain man had a tub. People would come to him to have their clothes dyed. The tub contained a solution of dye. Whatever color a man wanted for his cloth, he would get by dipping the cloth in the tub. One man was amazed to see this and said to the dyer, "Please give me the dye you have in your tub." Now, Thakur tells this story on several different occasions, and usually we see in parentheses, all laugh. And I always find that interesting. That I'll get to that in a second. Anyhow, M says, "Was the master hinting that people professing different religions would come to him and have their spiritual consciousness awakened according to their own ideals?" Now, this parable, we can say, allegory, parable, can be looked at in two ways. One, Sri Ramakrishna himself is like that tub. And this is what M is referring to here, or intimating here, that whoever came to Sri Ramakrishna saw in him a follower of their own path. Thakur used to say that. Whenever the Vaishnavas come, they think that I'm a Vaishnava. The Shaktas, they think I'm a Shakta. And partly because he would go into that mood when he saw followers of those traditions as well. So we'll see, for example, when he used to see Gopalarma, that there were times when he would even start crawling on the ground like baby Gopal. He would get into that mood. Now, the other way of understanding this, and Thakur uses this illustration this other way, is the nirguna and saguna aspects, and God with form and God without form. That the dye will be the substance of Brahman, and those who want to worship in a particular way can see God in any particular. God can take any particular form that the devotee wants to see without undergoing any change. Now, if we think about it, what will the color be in this vat of dye? It has to be colorless. It has to be colorless in order for it to dye things in all different types of color. If it's any one color, every cloth will come out that same color. So this is why everyone laughs. Can we dye a cloth, say a white cloth, can we dye it colorless? No. It has to be some particular color. So Thakur gives many illustrations like this. If we think about the different bathing ghats, and people come and take water, and they have different pictures and different names and everything, it's the same thing. There's one substance will be there, and the water will take the form of the different containers. Now, if water itself has any form, it can't take the form of the container. It has to be formless in order to take every particular form. So Brahman, if Brahman can manifest in all different forms, it has to be formless. This is really that teaching. And if we want to access this Brahman through the mind, it has to take a form and a shape. There's no way that we can take the formless water unless we put it in a container, and that container has a shape, and the water takes that shape. So that's our mental conception of God. If we want that infinite absolute reality, we dive in the water. we dive in it, and we merge ourselves in it. Otherwise, even with the conception, then this formless, it's taking some type of shape and form, even if intellectually our conception is the Nirguna Brahman. Still, that's a conception, and it's taking the shape of the container of the mind. So here, this is showing this Bahurupi aspect, huh? That God is capable of taking all different forms. And this is why Thakur used to say that if we start with this Nirguna Brahman aspect and we don't go beyond that, we're not getting the full picture. We're not getting the full weight, he used to say, the full picture. If we say that Brahman is like the sun, and the sun is light, and we say, now this is another example, that this the sun, light of the sun is colorless. It's invisible. It has no color of its own. Yet going through a prism, it takes all possible colors. Now, if we say that it only is invisible, we don't see anything else about it, we're not getting the full picture. That Shakti, that power for it to manifest as all possible colors, dwells within that infinite Brahman. So this is why Thakur says that you don't get the full weight of the bell fruit unless you have all aspects of it. Some people take that to mean this Vishishta Dvaitavada, which it can, but it can be looked at it this other way also, that unless we add the Shakti together with this Nirguna Brahman, then we don't get the full picture. Because this consciousness is not just awareness. This consciousness has the power to create and to project. So that has to be understood. The sun, it also has the power to warm and to give life and sustain life. It's not just illumination. And of course, to manifest all the different colors of the rainbow are contained in that invisible light. So the vat, the liquid in this vat will be like that. It'll have to be colorless, but it's not like any other. If we just say, well, then we can just have water. Water has no color, but we dip the cloth in, it doesn't work. So it's not like any ordinary type of colorless thing. It's colorless, but with the potential to manifest as any possible color. And this also shows the subjective aspect of the personal God. Because I choose, no, I want to see it as yellow, or I want to see it as red, and then it comes out that way. Now, if we're really fall on the side of the personal God, then we say that God knows that my devotee wants to see me this way. I'm going to reveal myself in this way. If we want to look at it from the subjective point of view, then it'll automatically manifest that way because that's the shape of the container that I have, and that's the uh, aspect of God that I want to see. That's my understanding of God. That's the tradition that I grew up in. This is the culture that I'm from. All of these things will help color and explain why we experience God in a particular way. So, I mean, there are instances where people have a realization of God in a way that is unexpected for them, or even a vision of an avatar or something that they never worshipped, or a dream of Swami Krishna or Holy Mother, something like that. These things happen, of course. But in general, we won't find these great Catholic saints having a vision of Mother Kali. It'll be of Christ. Now, we have two ways of looking at it. God says, my child wants to see my Christ form, so I'll reveal myself that way. Or we can say, this is the way that divinity will blossom forth in their hearts, because this is the desire of their heart to see God that way. So we have two ways. We were very hard to say subjective, objective. How much is one? How much is the other? Very hard to uh, put a figure on it. This percentage is subjective. This percentage is objective. Anyhow, there's a very beautiful way of understanding. See, the very beginning, when Sri Ramakrishna says that God is both with form and without form, M is completely baffled. How can something have two opposite attributes like that? Now, the male could be both white and black at the same time? Impossible. But now we understand that in order for God to be able to manifest in all possible forms, that there has to be at the ground level, underlying everything, formlessness. I remember in my college days that I studied Western philosophy, and there was one philosopher, Heidegger, and he used to say the ground of being is non-being. The ground of being is nothingness. And, we're students, we memorize these things. We can write it down on the test and everything, but it didn't mean anything to me. And now I have some understanding, that if something can manifest as all possible things, then in itself it has to be empty. If it has anything particular in it, then it won't be able to manifest in all possible ways. So this is something like what Sri Ramakrishna is saying here. Of course, with Thakur, he experienced these things. He experienced God in all of these different forms. That was through his sadhana. So it wasn't theoretical for him. For us, we marvel at the theory behind it and how logical it is. But for him, it was the realization, of course. Yeah.
For Sri Ramakrishna, the personal God was Mother Kali and impersonal was Brahman. That is, he wanted to see the divine in the form of Mother Kali. That's why he saw the vision of Mother Kali.
No, he saw the personal God in the form of Rama, in the form of Krishna, in the form of Shiva, in all different forms. It's the seeing God as Mother Kali, personal God as Mother Kali. That's what he kept going back to. But this is why, after he had that vision, he could have stopped. But he said, no, I want to see how God is worshipped in other traditions, other ways and everything. So his realization was that the Mother Kali form was the one dearest to his heart, but not absolute. If that's absolute, then these other forms, we have to just say that this is some misconception on the part of people of other religious faiths, that they're worshiping God as Father, but I know God is really Mother. That's the beginning and the end of it. God can't be Father. God is Mother. If the personal God is Mother, then, but Thakur didn't have that understanding. This was the form that appealed to him most, and was of course real to him and everything. But most of the time, when he talks about Mother, he himself says, "When what you call Brahman, I call Kali." He understood that it was this play, this personal, impersonal, formless with form, that play between Nirguna, Saguna, Brahman. That was the Divine Mother for him. So even the songs we have, we were reading so many beautiful songs how Divine Mother manifested herself as Krishna, and so this is when it comes to the absolute aspect, and even that's a contradiction in terms of absolute aspect. But this is where Thakur felt that experience is the same for everyone, because the mind is not functioning, ego is gone, just merged in that oneness. Soon as the mind comes down a little bit, then it goes back into what is the shape of the mind. That'll determine exactly the shape of that the water takes in that container. So even God realized souls will have different experiences of the Saguna Brahman, where we can say Sabikalpa Santi. They'll have different experiences. And if they don't have this view, this understanding that Thakur had, even those who have had some higher realization can quarrel among each other. Look at our Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, and others. We take them to be men of realization. It really the great saints, more than the acharyas, that were a little broader in their view and didn't care for caste so much and things like that. Master, to Balaram's father, don't read books anymore, but you may read books on devotion, such as the life of Chaitanya. Now, another curious thing, this Vaishnava tradition that we're talking about, highly devotional and at the same time highly scholastic, full of philosophical books, and we think devotion is such a spontaneous, natural thing, but they'll break it down into 19 different things of this and 20 things of this and everything. These Goswamis and everything, very highly technical, scholastic works, and very scholarly people study these things and write commentaries and everything. But at the same time, we have the beautiful biographies of Chaitanya Deva, the Chaitanya Charitamrita and Bhagavata and everything, that are very inspiring. And we also get some of the teaching. They're very similar to the gospel, actually, these books. So Thakur says, don't read books anymore, but you may read books on devotion, such as the life of Chaitanya. The whole thing is to love God and taste his sweetness. He is sweetness, and the devotee is its enjoyer. Rasa, rasika, what is it? Something like that. The devotee drinks the sweet bliss of God. Further, God is the lotus and the devotee the bee. The devotee sips the honey of the lotus. As a devotee cannot live without God, so also God cannot live without his devotee. Now, these things have to be understood in kind of allegorical way. If we want to be very philosophical, we end up saying that a Brahmin can have no desire, had no needs, is perfect and everything. How can Brahmin have the longing for the devotee? So in this particular Vaishnava tradition, everything will be seen in this play of Krishna and Radha, or Krishna and the cowherd boys, or Mother Yashoda and the baby Gopala. It'll be seen in those terms, so that there'll be times when the gopis are longing for Krishna, times for Krishna is longing for the gopis. It'll work both ways. So Thakur felt that in the beginning, it's all of up to us. We make all of the effort, all of our devotion, our love, and everything. We get closer and closer, and we become incapable of doing anything. So then God himself comes towards us, or that magnet pulls us in the rest of the way. And as if God needs us, as if this is all making this a very sweet type of relationship between the individual and God. We don't have to worry about are these things literally true? Is this philosophically sensible and everything? Why does God need us? We don't, these are all spiritual attitudes that are very helpful in spiritual life. It's a big mistake to try to shove everything into this pigeonhole of philosophy. This is poetry. Is meant to be felt. Even the Upanishads. I have a very strong feeling about this. Even the Upanishads should be read partly as philosophy, partly as poetry. And we even say the kavis. The kavis, these are the wise men and or women also, and poets. It means both. So these things are to be felt on a certain level. That they won't always appeal to us if we want to use very hard logic with these things.
Brahman becomes God, or in concept of God to Brahman to God. It is in reference to devotees. What is the concept of personal God without?
Yeah, this is what this relationship between the sweetness and the enjoyer of sweetness. Yeah, otherwise, if there's no devotee, then there's only this nirguna Brahman. Yeah. So this, and as I say, either God reveals himself that way, or just this is the way this human mind works. And the point is that no matter what the shape of the container is, we're getting the essence, we're getting the substance. We argue over the shape and the name and the form, but we're all getting this. If we can access it, we're getting the real stuff. So this is the main point. Yeah.
So maybe the Ramakrishna says when we take one step towards God,
Yes.
That is also in this similar reference.
Yeah, same thing. But there's an allegory. God has no feet that he's walking. Huh? Yeah. So to what extent do we make it an allegory? Do we say, well, only the part about walking is the allegory, or do we take the whole thing? That it simply means that as we proceed in spiritual life, that we realize our inability to do everything on our own, and that realization takes place through some type of grace, that power is so great that it will pull us in. We can understand it that way also. Those who have a very strong faith in the personal God, they can take these things more literally. They won't have a problem with that. Those of us who try to see things, through the prism of logic and reason, and then we can understand it this way. But Thakur explained it for us that way. He doesn't say that you love God, so you'll immerse your mind and it'll come out the color of God. He said it'll come out a different color depending on what they want. So he's giving us both the attitude of the devotee and the attitude of the philosopher. How we can understand how one and the same substance can, because our minds are different. Our minds are different. We have different types of cloth. We put even if the cloth if the dye is a particular color, some will take a very strong dye. Some of the dye will hardly do anything to it. And if the cloth is a certain color, you add the dye, it'll be a mixture. You take a yellow cloth and you put it in a red dye, it'll come out a little bit purpley, something like that. So even from that point of view, that the experience of the mystics will be different because their mind, their worldview and their understanding and their type of devotion is a little bit different. But it's all real. This is the whole point, that people will say that, this is cultural because you want to see God this way, you see God that way, that it's your imagination. Well, partly imagination. That's part of the whole thing. That imagination means that a little bit of the human mind is coloring the experience, but the substance is real. We're accessing the real substance, and this is why Thakur says that the water will take the shape that we want it to when it freezes into ice, and when the sun comes up, it'll melt back in. But if the only way we can get it is when in that ice form, then we take it in that form that we want. And when the sun of knowledge comes, then it'll be the same. It's the same water. It doesn't matter. Same water. I know one Swami, he used to give this example of we want to get intoxicated. We want this divine intoxication. Some people can just take liquor and drink it straight. Others, they have to put ice in it. Some, they have to mix it with sugar, with the soda or something like that. Now, the ones who mix it with all sorts of things, other people will say, that's not getting you drunk. That's not getting you intoxicated. No, but the same stuff that's getting you intoxicated is getting me intoxicated. But the other makes it sweet for me. So different ways of understanding these things. Thakur is so liberal and had such a subtle understanding of all of these very abstruse spiritual and philosophical ideas. They were just so natural and easy for him. Yeah.
You also talked about the time, how long it took.
Yeah, now this is another a way of this. We use this illustration of dye as dyeing the mind. This is a little different. That Thakur says that we want to let the mind get dyed in that color of God. This is that Ranjita that we have with the Holy Mother, Tadbhav Ranjita Akaram, that her nature was dyed in the whole being of Sri Ramakrishna. So this idea that whatever we meditate on, it's like letting the mind soak in that dye. It takes the color of that. So the dye has to be strong. There has to be some intensity to it if we want the color to be strong. And we have to let it sit for a long time. We have to let it soak it up. And the cloth has to be clean. So these are different aspects to that. When we sit for meditation, there should be some intensity. There should be a little time that we give it. And the mind itself should have a certain amount of purity. If we want it to really take the color, that means get transformed into divinity. Of course, we can say transformed into what it really is in the first place, but that's a different way of looking at it. So the devotee becomes the lotus and God the bee. It is the Godhead that has become these two in order to enjoy its own bliss. That is the significance of the episode of Radha and Krishna. So this is one very nice interpretation of Radha and Krishna, that God incarnates himself in these two forms. One, the beloved, and the other, the lover, in order to experience that relationship and to demonstrate that relationship. Because when we talk about the avatar, we have to talk about the Shakti aspect also. We can't talk about Sri Ramakrishna without Holy Mother, or the Krishna without Radha. Of course, different traditions, it'll be Rukmini and other things, but in this particular tradition, it's always Radha. And she represents the Shakti of Krishna. And here represents that relationship between, there's a Madhur Bhava, relationship between the lover and the beloved. So there's a footnote. According to one school, the Vaishnava religion, the Supreme God himself became Radha and Krishna in order to enjoy the bliss of their mutual communion. And this is the idea with Chaitanya Deva, that he was born as a combination of the two of them. That Krishna wanted to understand the joy that Radha had in with her devotion. So he was externally he looked like Radha, internally he was Krishna, because he had the golden complexion. At the beginning of spiritual life, the devotee should observe. See, Thakur is explaining, because he's that particular Vaishnava tradition. They'll have the highest reverence for the play of Radha and Krishna. So he's explaining to Balaram's father that there's a way of understanding this, that it's not literal. It doesn't have to be with Radha and Krishna. It can be any aspect of God as the lover and the beloved. That this is the real significance of it. If they're one-sided, it means that they are such a devotion to that particular way of worshiping God that they want everyone to do it and feel that this is the best. But as I say, all different religious traditions will have their element that is a little bit fanatical, a little bit of fanaticism. Swamiji said once that the beauty of these religious, of these devotional traditions, the bhakti movement, is that fervor that they have, that love of God. But the negative side is fanaticism. Yeah, they all feel that our path is the best path. At the beginning of spiritual life, the devotee should observe such rites as pilgrimage, putting a string of beads around his neck, and so forth. But outward ceremonies gradually drop off as he attains the goal, the vision of God. Now, one other thing Thakur didn't particularly appreciate about this Vaishnava tradition is that there are a lot of external signs of things. Sometimes stamping the whole body and wearing clothes, everything, Hare Krishna, and big marks on the forehead and everything.
They have some reason why they have different kinds of marks.
Yeah, they're all different things. The Ramanuja tradition has in one way, the Shaivas do it another way, and they have different materials. Some will be sandal paste, some will be that vermilion, some will be ash. I don't know. Yeah, and there'll be three things, and yeah, there and like that. Yeah, I don't know all this. There's some tradition behind all of them, and some significance, I guess. So this was one of Thakur's ideas, is that in the beginning we start out with the ritual. Things fall off little by little by little as we progress in spiritual life. We go from this Vaidhi Bhakti state to this Anuraga, and everything. At that point, we don't have to worry about the rituals, and but they fall off on their own. We don't one day decide, I've been doing puja for 30 years, I'm not going to do it anymore, because we still may need the help of it. I read a very nice thing. This Swami Bhuteshananji. He was talking about these rites and rituals and even image worship and everything. And he said, if we say that this is the lowest rung on the ladder. This is the first step. That why should we do all of that? Then we never get to the second step. We have to start. Sometimes we have to start at the first step, and then gradually we can leave it behind. But if we think we're too bigoted to think that no, we're above all of that, then maybe we don't even get to the first step in spiritual life. But outward ceremonies gradually drop off as he attains the goal, the vision of God. Then his only activity is the repetition of God's name and contemplation and meditation on him. The pennies equivalent to 16 rupees make a big heap, but 16 silver coins do not look like such a big amount. Again, the quantity becomes much smaller when you change the 16 rupees into one gold mohur. And if you change the gold into a tiny piece of diamond, people hardly notice it. What an interesting way of putting it, huh? So the manifestations of our spiritual emotion in the beginning, that will be a big fuss and everything. Everything as we progress, everything becomes less manifest. It goes deeper and deeper within, and we don't need any external show of things. Orthodox Vaishnavas insist on the outer insignia of religion. They criticize any devotee who does not wear these marks. Was that why the master said that after the vision of God, a devotee becomes indifferent to outer marks, giving up formal worship when the goal of spiritual life is attained? Master to Balaram's father. The Karta Bhajas grouped the devotees into 4 classes. Karta Bhaja, there were several different sects within the Vaishnava tradition that were current during Thakur's lifetime. The Karta Bhaja, the Ghoshpara, Sahajiyas, others, and this Vaishnava Charan, whom he loved so much and had such a beautiful, sweet relationship with, he was one of the main acharyas of this Karta Bhaja sect. But Thakur, he criticized them a little bit also, but he warned his disciples that some of their practices were the Vamachara, the taking of wine, and men and women reenacting this Krishna Radha play and all of that. So he warned them against that. But Thakur was so liberal. There's a section in the Lila Prasanga, the Great Master, where Swami Sharananda writes that in those days we had such contempt for these tantric, these left-handed brahmachari traditions, that we would just sneer at them, look down on them and everything. And Thakur said to us, no, don't hate any tradition. This is also a path. This is like entering the house through the back door that goes into the latrine. It's not a clean path, but for some people, they may also be able to have realization through that. So don't look down upon anything, but don't follow it yourself. He would warn them that way. So even compared to these highly educated young men who became the direct disciples, he was so much more liberal. But Thakur liked this. He refers very often to this categorization that they make. Karta Bhaja group the devotees into 4 classes: the Paravartaka, the Sadhaka, the Siddha, and the Siddha of the Siddha. The Paravartaka is the beginner, someone just taking to spiritual life. The Paravartaka puts the mark of his religion on his forehead, wears a string of beads around his neck, and observes other outer conventions. The Sadhaka, the struggling devotee, does not care so much for elaborate rites. Now, what are we? We can call ourselves sadhakas. Yeah, I mean we're beginners in one sense, but we're not taking the first step. Maybe we've at least already taken the first step, and we have a spiritual practice. We can consider ourselves, I think, sadhakas. That's a big. I mean, they're all different levels too. They're very advanced and senior sadhakas and the junior ones. The sadhaka, the struggling devotee, does not care so much for elaborate rites. An example of this class is the baul. The bauls were very, very interesting. Uh, Nonconformist, very free, outside of the normal social norms. They didn't observe caste. They didn't observe religion in many cases. That there'll be Muslims and Hindus together. That some of the Baals were kind of Sufis and some of them were Vaishnavas. They were Baals that followed this Chaitanya tradition. And they liked to sing and dance, and they were very free. And some of them very highly evolved people, and some of the songs that they wrote are so beautiful. I know about this Lalan Fakir because I've seen the movie so many times. If you ever get a chance, this what is it called? Moner Manush. A beautiful film. And Thakur knew he lived in a remote area, so he wasn't that well known. It was the Tagore family that made him publicized him because he lived in their area that was part of their. They were jamidars, the landlords. But Thakur knew some of the songs, and he was familiar with some of these teachings and everything.
The Baul songs are very difficult to understand. Very critical.
They're very, yeah, they're a little bit like sutras. They're a little bit highly symbolic language. It's done specially so that they say only a Baul can recognize another Baul. Only Shai can recognize another Shai. They have it with their own kind of symbolic, mysterious type of language, so they all understand it. So it's true. They'll do things with for the three gunas and different symbolic things. Yeah. Some of it though is very simple and easy to understand. The Lalan Fakir songs, many of them, they're really beautiful, and many of them with this idea of harmony of Islam and Hinduism. Yeah. There's one song. How does it go? Kali upar Ali na Ali upar Kali. Zol upar Pani na Pani upar Zol. Which is greater? Pani and Zol, same thing, water. Kali and Ali, the same, just to show different names. Same thing that Thakur was teaching. They had that idea. It's very liberal that way. But they were outcasts a little bit because, first of all, this Orthodox Hindu society didn't like this mixing of religions and castes and everything. They didn't care for caste or anything. And they didn't have traditional marriages and things also. They could have their companions in spiritual practice and everything. So an example of this class is the Baul. So they have their spiritual, and they live in these ashrams, akaras and everything, and spend their whole life devoted to spiritual practice. The Siddha, the perfect, firmly believes that God exists. So Siddha, perfect, it doesn't mean that this is someone who has attained to the highest state. That'll be the Siddha of the Siddha. The Siddha of the Siddha, the supremely perfect, like Chaitanya, not only has realized God, but also has become intimate with him and talks with him all the time. This is the last limit of realization. So we can say the Siddha will be like a realized soul, perhaps, and this last one will be like the Vijnani, someone who's really had the highest realization and could come back down again from it. The others, Siddha, they may have had some type of realization, but maybe not this highest nirvikalpa samadhi, and from which very few can come down. There are many kinds of spiritual aspirants. So now, what Thakur is saying is, this is one way of dividing them into four. There are many other ways of dividing it. We can do it according to gunas also. There are many kinds of spiritual aspirants. Those endowed with sattva perform their spiritual practices secretly. So Thakur liked this very much. He used to say, don't make a show of your devotion. Don't let others know what you're about your spiritual practices. The less they know of your spiritual practices, the better. He used to say that. Those endowed with sattva perform their spiritual practices secretly. They look like ordinary people, but they meditate inside the mosquito net. So that means that They're not even coming outside of their room. They'll be inside their room, just maybe on their bed. They don't want other people to know. Other people may think they're sleeping. They don't care. They want to do it outside of the gaze of others. Aspirants endowed with rajas exhibit outward pomp, a string of beads around the neck, a mark on the forehead, an ochre robe, a silk cloth, a rosary with a gold bead, and so on. They are like stall keepers advertising their wares with signboards. All religions and all paths call upon their followers to pray to one and the same God. Now, Thakur, he hasn't told us about the Sattvic devotee, which he does in many other places. Oh, we started out with that. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. All religions and all paths call upon their followers to pray to one and the same God. Therefore, one should not show disrespect to any religion or religious opinion. Now, this is for Balaram's father. He's assuming that he's going to be a little bit one-sided. And we know he's a little bit one-sided because otherwise they wouldn't object to him going to Sri Ramakrishna. Now, it's also true that they don't know this Sri Ramakrishna. That just they've heard rumors, and anybody who worships in a Kali temple, that's already a black mark against them. But after meeting him, of course, their minds will change a little. Therefore, one should not show disrespect to any religion or religious opinion. It is God alone who is called Satchidananda Brahman in the Vedas, Satchidananda Krishna in the Puranas, and Satchidananda Shiva in the Tantras. It is one and the same Satchidananda. There are different sects of Vaishnavas. That which is called Brahman in the Vedas is also called Alek Niranjan by one Vaishnava sect. This will also be a type of vow. I think they do this. Alek means that which cannot be pointed out or perceived by the sense organs. Probably alakshya.
That is a Sikhism also. There is a word cry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's the Sikh Dharma. They also like this formless aspect, and yeah, there'll be some overlap there also.
That word,
Huh?
Niranjan,
I like Niranjan. Is what?
probably from Sikhism to Sikhism.
Well, with Niranjan also. Okay. I didn't know that. So this is also in the Sikh Dharma tradition. Alek means that which cannot be pointed out or perceived by the sense organs. According to this sect, Radha and Krishna are only two bubbles of this Alek. So this is also a little bit of this Vedanta idea. No, he's saying that it's one of the sects of Vaishnava used this term. So it could be just a term that found its way into two different traditions somehow. According to Vedanta, there is no incarnation of God. The Vedantas say that Rama and Krishna are but two waves in the ocean of Satchidananda. Now we have another footnote here. This is a reference to Advaita Vedanta. And I would go even further. And generally, when Thakur talks about Vedanta, it's a reference to the Upanishads. Now, if we say Advaita Vedanta, is there room for the avatar in Advaita Vedanta? If we look at Gita, Bhagavad Gita, yeah, there's nothing in Gita that is opposed to Advaita Vedanta. It looks at it from the point of view of devotion, and the dualists can also point to the verses in their favor and everything. But here, and this is part of Vedanta, we have our Prasthanatraya, the three main sources for Vedanta are the Upanishad, Gita, and Brahma Sutra. So we can't really say that there's no avatar in the Vedantic tradition. First of all, The Vedanta tradition will, of course, include the other schools of Vedanta. Yeah, and there's a Bhagavad Gita and everything. So it really, from the historically, from the point of view of the Upanishads themselves, there's no reference to this avatar in the Upanishads. So historically, the statement is true, and there will be some Advaitins who don't accept the avatar, at least in the Puranic sense, that God Himself has descended to earth. They may have their own understanding of it. The one great example we have in our order is the Bharat Maharaj, Swami Abhayanandaji. He was a real thorough, beginning to top to bottom, Advaita Vedantin. And he would never go into the shrine, the main temple, to bow down like anyone, make pranam like everybody else does. Sometimes on these festival days, he would go just to see the decorations and everything. But tremendous devotion to Sri Ramakrishna. Of course, one of the great and highly realized souls. He looked upon as one of the stalwarts of our order, the disciple of Holy Mother, but didn't have that same idea. And even Swamiji, Narendra, that he used to argue that how can we say that one person is an avatar, God dwells equally within all beings? There's a Vedantic principle. So Thakur would say, yes, from that point of view, you're right. That's why when Thakur said to Swami at the end, he who was Raman, he who was Krishna, is now here in this body, is Raman, but not in your Vedantic sense. Not in the sense that everybody can say it. I can also say it. Thakur used to say, Raman dwells within all men, Sita within all women, God dwells within all beings. Like, well, God dwells within me, but not in the same sense, in a special sense, that with some special commission or any other, there's lots of ways of understanding it, this idea of the avatar. So Thakur starts out, according to Vedanta, there is no incarnation of God. The Vedantas say that Rama and Krishna are but two waves in the ocean of Satchidananda. Now, this is a very nice way of understanding it. Two gigantic waves. Two waves, of course, we're all waves in that. Two gigantic waves that with such tremendous power that seeing that wave, we understand the power of the ocean itself. Thakur liked this with this way of understanding it too. He didn't insist that we have to think that Vishnu is in heaven and decides there's too much trouble down there, I better incarnate and go down. This is an allegory. We may take it literally if we like, we don't have to, but we can understand this phenomenon of these special souls that are like huge waves. And our devotion to them can be equally as great as the devotion to personal God. Thakur used to say, and this is the easiest way to worship God in the personal form as the avatar, in this human form. In reality, there are not two, there is only one. A man may call on God by any name. If he is sincere in his prayer, he will certainly reach him. He will succeed if he has longing. As Sri Ramakrishna spoke these words to the devotees, he was overwhelmed with divine fervor. Coming down to partial consciousness of the world, he said to Balaram's father, "Are you the father of Balaram?" Yeah, sometimes when Thakur came down, his mind would still be lingering in that other realm. He would say, "Is it daytime or nighttime?" That was when Girish saw him for the first time. He said, "What kind of madman is this? He doesn't know if it's daytime or nighttime." He wasn't impressed. He thought it was a big show and everything, but it wasn't a show. When he came down, he would be like that sometimes. All sat in silence. Balaram's aged father was silently telling his beads. There's another thing. These types of Vaishnavas always with their beads, always. Yeah, and many of them, they'll have a little pouch, or they'll keep it in the fold of their cloth, or even just take it out, keep it around their neck when they're not using it and everything. They're very devoted to japa. Master to M and the others. Well, these people practice so much japa and go to so many sacred places, but why are they like this? And that means a little bit too orthodox. Why do they make no progress? In their case, it seems as if the year consists of 18 months, The Thakur is saying too much outward show and too much ritual and things. Once I said to Harish, what is the use of going to Benares if one does not feel restless for God? And if one feels that longing, then this very place is Benares. They make so many pilgrimages and repeat the name of God so much, but why do they not realize anything? It is because they have no longing for God. God reveals himself to the devotee if only he calls upon him with a longing heart. Now, he's not talking about all of them. He's talking about those who are too much given to this outward show and ritual. At the beginning of a yatra performance, much light-hearted restlessness is to be observed on the stage. At that time, one does not see Krishna. Next, the sage Narada enters with his flute and sings longingly, O Govinda, O my life, O my soul. Then Krishna can no longer remain away and appears with the cowherd boys. And that is the end of that day. So we'll start next time on page 307. It'll be Tuesday, October 16th, 1883. Om Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanukham Bhatudha Vikraham Vai Yashavataram Parameshamidhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namah. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.